In 1947, Los Angeles was shocked by a crime so brutal and mysterious that it still haunts the city to this day. Elizabeth Short, a young woman known as the Black Dahlia, was found in a dark, empty lot, her body mutilated in the most shocking way. Who did this to her, and why? Stay with us as we dig deep into the story that will keep you questioning everything you know about crime and justice. The morning of January 15, 1947, in Los Angeles began like any other day. One woman, Elizabeth Short, that morning would mark the end of her life in the most horrific and mysterious way imaginable. Elizabeth was only 22 years old, a young woman who had moved to Los Angeles with dreams of becoming a famous movie star. She had a beauty that caught the attention of many, yet she remained unknown, constantly moving between different places in the city, always searching for a big break. She had been struggling, moving from one apartment to another, meeting new people, and working odd jobs to support herself. On that fateful morning, a woman named Betty was out for a walk with her young daughter. As they strolled along the street, they saw something so shocking that it would haunt them forever. Lying was a body, severed in half and placed in a pose that seemed deliberately eerie. At first, Betty thought it was a mannequin, but as she got closer, the horror set in. The body was real, and it belonged to Elizabeth Short. What shocked people the most wasn't just the gruesome nature of the crime, but how meticulously the killer had carried it out. The victim had been drained of blood, and her body was positioned in a way that seemed calculated, like some twisted work of art. The killer had taken his time, leaving behind a scene that would become one of the most famous and chilling murder mysteries in Los Angeles. Elizabeth Short's murder would come to be known as the Black Dahlia case, a name that would echo for decades as the investigation failed to find any clear answers. The name Black Dahlia was given to Elizabeth Short by the press, inspired by a popular movie at the time called The Blue Dahlia. However, this nickname, which would become synonymous with her brutal murder, did little to explain who Elizabeth truly was or why she became the target of such a horrific crime. Elizabeth had arrived in Los Angeles just a few years earlier with dreams of making it big in Hollywood. She was young, beautiful, and had all the qualities that seemed to promise success in the world of entertainment. However, her time in California was far from glamorous. Elizabeth moved from one place to another, trying to find her footing in the competitive world of film. She had a reputation for being a little mysterious, often seen at bars or hanging around local spots, trying to make connections and seeking a way to get into the movie business. Her life was far from easy, and her hopes of finding fame seemed elusive. In the months leading up to her death, Elizabeth was seen dating several men, but no one seemed to know her well enough to understand what she was truly after. She was often described as a dreamer, a woman with aspirations but no clear way of achieving them. Elizabeth's death, so violent and sudden, left many wondering what had led her to such a tragic end. Was she a victim of her own ambition, or was there something more? When the police arrived at the scene of the crime, they were met with a horrifying sight that would leave even the most seasoned investigators shaken. Elizabeth Short's body had been meticulously placed in a vacant lot, with her torso severed at the waist. The lack of blood and the careful positioning of the body led many to believe that the killer had medical knowledge, or at least a cold, calculating nature. There were no signs of struggle, no evidence that Elizabeth had fought back against her attacker. This suggested that the killer may have known her, or at least caught her off guard. The body was so clean and arranged with such precision that the police initially thought it might be a joke. But as the investigation began, it became clear that this was no joke. Elizabeth's death was real, and the brutality of the crime was shocking. What made the case even more chilling was the lack of clues. No witnesses came forward, and there was no obvious evidence left behind. It was as though the killer had planned every detail carefully and then disappeared without leaving a trace. The police were left with nothing but questions and an overwhelming sense of confusion. Who could commit such a gruesome act and why? Was it random, or was Elizabeth specifically targeted? The lack of answers only deepened the mystery, and as the days turned into weeks, the case grew colder. The Black Dahlia case had become a haunting riddle that seemed unsolvable. As the investigation into Elizabeth Short's murder continued, the press seized on the case, turning it into a nationwide case. Elizabeth became a symbol of Hollywood's dark side, a beautiful young woman whose dreams had ended in the most tragic way. The press dubbed her the Black Dahlia, and the sensation surrounding the case only intensified. Newspapers across the country reported on every new detail, from the gruesome discovery of the body to the mysterious letters that started arriving at various media outlets. In the weeks following her death, several letters arrived at the Los Angeles Examiner, each one seemingly from the killer. The first letter, written in blood, confessed to the murder and taunted the police, saying that they would never catch him. The killer seemed to be playing a game, daring the authorities to figure out who he was. Each letter grew more bizarre and disturbing. Some included pieces of Elizabeth's personal belongings, while others contained strange drawings and cryptic messages. The killer's behavior seemed almost staged, as though he was enjoying the fear and confusion he was causing. The press, along with the public, became obsessed with the case, and the mystery deepened. Who was the killer, and why were they so confident they would never be caught? The game had begun, but no one knew how it would end. Despite the numerous letters and the growing public fascination with the case, the investigation stopped. The police had no solid leads, and no one had come forward with useful information. Several suspects were interviewed, but no one was definitively linked to the crime. Among the most notable suspects was George, a former doctor with a suspicious background. George had connections to the case, and some believed that he had the medical knowledge necessary to commit such a precise murder. However, despite the many theories and the mounting evidence against him, there was never enough to charge him with the crime. Other suspects included various men who had been in Elizabeth's life, but none of them were ever proven to be involved. The police even considered the possibility that the killer was someone outside of Los Angeles, someone who had traveled into the city with the intent to commit murder. But no matter how many leads the police followed, they could never find the killer. As time went on, the case grew colder, and the once promising investigation began to stop. The Black Dahlia had become a mystery that no one could solve.